So welcome everybody. This is our second virtual meetup for the Salesforce for Manufacturing user group. I'll skip to the next slide. My name is Andrew Reiser, and I'm the user group leader by day, and the co-founder and president of Mountain Point, and started this user group specifically for the manufacturing community about 3 years ago, and recently, as of almost a year and a half ago, Salesforce has announced a Salesforce for Manufacturing vertical. So a lot of good movement in the ecosystem, and some exciting presentations that we'll hear from today. But if you need to reach out and contact me with any information regarding the user group, or would like to participate in any future meetups, please leverage this contact information shown here on the screen, and I'll do my best to get back to y'all. Next slide. I'm assuming that everybody that joins or participates or finds these recordings already knows about community groups, but if you don't, there is a Trailblazer community module out there on Trailhead that describes more about what that is. But in a nutshell, community groups allow like-minded folks around specific topics or regions. So for example, there's major city and metropolitan areas have their own user groups that typically meet up in person around the Salesforce platform and products. And this by nature is a virtual user group. So we have members that are from around the globe that participate in this in a virtual environment. Next slide, please. The plan for this user group is to continue to grow the community. So as we sit as of this morning, we have 442 active members that have registered, with another 165 pending. And really just to highlight the notion of a pending user is somebody that doesn't meet the criteria to join the group or provide value into the group. So we try to do our best to keep the group with, like I had mentioned, like-minded individuals and folks that really think can provide value and insights to everybody as a part of this. And there's also some guidelines and rules that we do from a housekeeping standpoint, just to make sure that we don't have an influx of people that are just trolling or shouldn't belong in the group. So part of the goal is to continue to grow this community and keep this industry focused, since it is a group focused on the manufacturing. And it's also to empower you all, so folks that are trailblazers, and empower you to ask questions about anything that's going on in your day-to-day life. So if you're an admin, any challenges that you guys are facing, if you're a developer, any issues that you might come across, get a lot of questions through the group about adoption and how to present the value and the feedback of to senior leadership, a lot of things on change management. So everything around digital transformation as a buzzword, I feel like we've had a lot of good dialogue and questions from the group. So encourage everybody to keep engaging and participating and sharing the best practices that you all face in your day-to-day lives as you're growing your systems and products for your respective organization. Like I mentioned, this is a virtual meetup, so our goal is to have this every other month through a Zoom recording, and it'll be posted back to the group as well for folks to consume. Hindsight's 2020, so looking back on it, today was probably not the best of days to to promote this and have this being Good Friday, and everybody probably checking out for the long weekend. But nevertheless, we'll stick to it and we'll get through it, and hopefully folks will consume it at their leisure. And then part of our goal from a structure and framework is to have 2 to 3 of the following categories represented or presented as a part of these virtual sessions. So for the example, the last presentations that we got 2 months ago, we had a presentation, 2 from Salesforce actually. So we had one from the industries and product team, and then also one from the success group in the manufacturing vertical. We also want to encourage community group members to participate and raise your hand or recommend a transformation story that you guys are taking place in and how that is evolving. And then today we're excited to have Lewis present here towards the end around industry thought leadership and the state of manufacturing. And then we also have Tom, who's going to be talking about Rootstock and Cloud ERP, so an app exchange partner. So we're trying to keep these diverse and have different points of view of insights into where manufacturing is heading and how everybody that participates can benefit. Next slide, please. So one last highlight. So if anybody has any questions or would want to participate in future meetups, please leverage this user group email to submit those or post within the user group. Would love to have more representation and more folks participate in future events. Next slide. And then without further ado, we have our two guest speakers today. So Tom Brennan, the CMO at Rootstock, Cloud ERP solution built on top of Salesforce's platform, and Louis Columbus, industry thought leader in this digital transformation space. And Louis is going to be sharing out some industry insights around the state of manufacturing from an annual survey that he compiles, and really interested in seeing where manufacturers are and what they're looking to accomplish in 2019. So without further ado, I'll hand it back over to Jess to hand it off to Tom, and we'll dive into it.
Yeah, here, let me stop sharing my screen so Tom can bring up his slides. And while I'm doing that, I'll give you guys just a little bit of background. So as Andrew mentioned, Tom is CMO at Rootstock Cloud ERP. He has worked in the industry and in CRM and cloud-based computing for a long time, though. He has over 30 years of professional experience working in ERP and for business software companies. And he's been a long-time evangelist of cloud computing and held many executive roles, including several years as a senior vice president of marketing at Financial Force. So we're really excited to have him share some of his insight, share some of his thoughts on where the manufacturing vertical is going in terms of cloud computing. And I will hand it off to you, Tom, and let you tell folks about Rootstock and some of the ideas that you guys are putting out there. Tom, are you on mute?
I was on mute. Can you hear me now and see my screen?
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I didn't want to interfere with Andrew when he's talking. So thanks for having me here, and it's great to be part of this community. What I'd like to do is I will give you a little background on Rootstock, and also a little bit kind of an introduction on the kinds of things you can do with ERP on the platform. A lot of folks really think of the Salesforce platform as a more or less a CRM system in some ways, and so I kind of want to maybe for some of you give you a wider view of all the kinds of things that you can do for ERP, and particularly manufacturing distribution. Then I want to talk a little bit about ways to transition to it, because transitioning to the ERP can be a pretty daunting thing, and for a lot of different reasons. Certainly the cloud and the Salesforce cloud help you transition in a lot of ways, but I'll take you through a couple ideas and something new that we recently introduced to help you transition from legacy ERP into the cloud. So by way of background, Rootstock is built exclusively on the Salesforce platform. We're on the App Exchange as a managed package. We focused 100% on manufacturers, distributors, and anybody who really service or repairs goods, hard goods. We have companies from startup companies that are high growth areas all the way up to companies with 25,000 seats running manufacturing on the platform. And so to give you some idea of what we were looking at when we, and it'd be interesting to hear what Louis has to say as well, in terms of kind of where the market is going. And when we first got into building Rootstock on the Salesforce platform, we saw a lot of things transitioning, and ERP has been around a long time. As Jessica was saying, I've been in the space for a long time, and in some ways it hasn't changed much. There's a lot of legacy systems that have been out there for many, many years that have kind of grew up at a time when manufacturing was different and the technology was very different. And so a lot of the ERP systems were very inward facing, designed in some ways for cost efficiency, which is fine and an admirable goal, of course. But that was sort of the whole angle to the thing, or the main kind of impetus to it, and in terms of running processes and things like that. And I won't go through all this on the left-hand side. That's for another day. But really what happened is manufacturing was in a certain place, and the systems and the technology was in a certain place. We saw an opportunity where things were changing, and manufacturing was getting much more customer-centric, where companies were trying to personalize their products, are trying to personalize their products a lot more. Instead of big production runs of the same thing, they're doing more specialized and differentiated products, which leads to a different view of way of costing and pricing and managing a shop floor and everything else. And so manufacturing had kind of a fundamental change in that way. And the other thing that's interesting as well is, especially all of you, if you're Salesforce customers, it's gotten much more customer oriented and much more customer success oriented, and realizing that you're not just going to compete just on the product, but it's also on how fast you're delivering, how you're servicing and taking care of that client. And so that's why we saw an opportunity then to make some changes. And so we built our application, and we built it on the Salesforce platforms, you'll see, and get a lot of benefits out of it. But there's some certain kind of design tenets we wanted in it. And the first one was to be flexible. And that was primarily geared around this whole idea that the whole production world was changing, and you need to react to markets much more quickly, react to what customers wanted, and personalization much more quickly. So in our product line, you can run, for example, many different modes, and you can run them simultaneously. One might be make to stock for a traditional side of business, but then something could be kind of a very personalized manufacturing kind of order as well. So that's a real kind of important kind of capability that we built in. The second thing, and this builds in on the Salesforce platform, is traditional ERP is very difficult to change, very expensive, very rigid. A lot of companies out there with really old versions, a lot of them are locked into old versions, and we didn't want that going forward. And as you're all aware, in the Salesforce world with a multi-tenanted platform, you can add, change the system very easily, more of a clicks not code approach, and keep moving forward in time and keep getting refreshes to your system all the time. And that's a really important thing in ERP, and it's really what hamstrung a lot of systems that are out there today. The third thing we wanted to do is take advantage, just like you do in CRM today, is make ERP much more connected and connected outside the internal facing walls, as I was talking about earlier, and providing mobile access just to employees, and providing information outside to the supply chain and the demand chain in communities. And in the legacy world, that was a very difficult thing to do. People would build extra mobile apps, or they'd have to go build portals and things like that. And with the Salesforce platform, we had sort of inherited a lot of capabilities where we are exposing functionality into communities, or automatically, just by virtue of building on it, available in a mobile device. So that was a really important thing in what we saw in using the platform to solve manufacturers' problems. Then the last thing, and this is a big one as well, is we wanted to be able to give customers a complete view of their business and a complete view of their customers. Especially in a customer-centric world, is when the customer calls, you don't want to get them bouncing around from different departments to answer a question. You want your salespeople to know whether their inventory is available, or when it's going to be there, and when it's going to ship. Your service folks may want to know whether an invoice has been paid, or if a customer had been caught up, or vice versa. You're chasing somebody for money, and you want to know if their service cases, are they upset about something? Did a shipment not happen? And so what we wanted to be able to do is build a 360-degree view, a true one. I know it's a very kind of trendy word these days. Again, this kind of came out in the 90s, but it's back. But the fact is, most companies don't have it, and we wanted to be able to offer that. And so what we did is we took one way to look at this, and you'll see this when we talk about how you can transition, is we took the base platform, all the things that you know and love, and then built on that alongside the Salesforce Sales Cloud you see on the left, and the Service Cloud all the way on the right, and fill everything in between. From taking order, engineering it, getting things sourced in the supply chain, producing it, stocking it, shipping it, and recording the financials, and then onto the service side of it as well. So that's what we decided to do, is build it on the platforms, and then now the process is all in one system, end to end. You can run manufacturing on it, and then you automatically inherit all the same tools that you have on the platform down below. So workflow works the same, chatter's available, mobile's available, communities, as I mentioned earlier on. And so that's, you know, how you get, by having everything on one platform, you get this complete view from marketing, sales, operations, finance, and service all in one system. So that might sound all well and good. You know, we love to move everything to ERP, but the fact of the matter is, not everybody's ready to go the whole way. And of course, we'd love you to go all the whole way over, but some people need sort of an incremental approach to go there. And so that's what Jessica and I were talking about. Might be a good thing to talk about today, is how can you transition there a little more incrementally. And you might, when you look in your companies today, you probably have something on a whiteboard that looks similar to this with a CRM and ERP system. And then there's probably arrows going in between those. And if you're a Salesforce customer already, you probably already have bought, you know, something or implemented something from Salesforce and are now in the process, whether it's the Sales, Service Cloud, on down the line. But then you're sitting there and you say, well, I've got this, you know, nice, real modern cloud system and I'm making progress there. What can I do about ERP? How can I unlock all that information that's there? How can I get the information that's in ERP out to my customer-facing employees so they can better service the customer? And so with that in mind, what we do is came up with a kind of a couple of levels to help you get there in increments. And I'll go through I'll spend some time mostly on the first two here. First one is to help just to start by providing visibility to ERP data on the platform. The second is to start moving some processes onto the platform, not all of ERP. And then the third is the full replacement. And we'll talk, as I said, about the first two one a little bit more. So if you look at trying to, the whole task of taking legacy ERP system, could be SAP, Oracle, doesn't matter, and you want to move it all onto the Salesforce cloud, and you have moved CRM and ERP together, typically what companies do is they'll sit down and they'll say, okay, I've got to design a bunch of custom objects on the system, and building a custom object is easy enough, but you need someone who knows ERP data to set up these objects, to make sure that there's the right attributes on them, that they have the right business rules around them. And the task of then taking legacy ERP data and moving it on can take a long time and be very expensive. And so what we wanted to do was to help simplify this. And so what we decided to do is to provide what we call an ERP data framework, which is a set of standard Salesforce objects with typical ERP capabilities like inventory and sales orders and invoices and things of that nature, and provide that as a shell data object for you to populate. And so this kind of eliminates one big task in the whole integration kind of effort when you're trying to move data over onto the platform. And so then you can take, you know, something like a MuleSoft or Jitterbit, whatever you like, but take say a MuleSoft and turn this more into a mapping exercise where using the tools in MuleSoft to map between a legacy system like an SAP and connectors through our side into the framework and into Salesforce platform. And so this greatly simplifies, you know, we're sort of the catcher's mitt to the data now coming from legacy ERP. Greatly simplifies that whole process of moving the data from one place to another. Now, we fully recognize that there's a lot of customized ERP systems out there with custom fields that maybe we haven't ever thought of. And so we know that there will be some kind of systems integration exercise that's needed here. You're still going to need someone to help you kind of think through that. But we do think, you know, in the 80-20 rule, we got 80% of what's coming at least from a legacy system. And it will vary by company, of course, but we think we've really made a dent in the significant portion that needs to be pulled over by doing this. And so then what you get by doing this now is if you're able to push the data onto the platform, it's now there and it's available to things like Einstein. And so you can run, you know, analytics across the demand side and CRM and what you've got also on the supply side and everything else inside of ERP, as an example. You can build a dashboard for a CEO to go in and say, hey, how am I doing on margins, and how am I doing on production, and at the same time, how do opportunities look for the month, all in one dashboard. So you get this one view of your entire business, and maybe even more so important is one view of your customer. Now all that ERP data is available to customer-facing employees that need to sell to or service your clients. So that's I think we're going to open for questions at the end here, but that's one level of kind of one step into ERP that you can make. And the next one is another step that's maybe some ways this one in particular is a little more common, and that's what's called two-tier ERP. And there's two different types in our view. One is to move a business unit onto the cloud, and the other one's a process. So in this case, we're looking at here is you might have say SAP or Oracle in a general site, but then you've got a new business unit that's a new product line, or it's something that has been acquired and it needs different types of setup from a configuration point of view from ERP, might need more flexibility. And so when you go to look to run that unit and look at how the current corporate system is, it doesn't match. And so the idea here is that you can run Rootstock Cloud ERP, usually alongside Salesforce CRM, in that business unit. It has sort of an arm's length kind of, and there's different ways to do this, arm's length kind of transfer of data back and forth with the SAP Oracle system, where you run the business unit with ERP, and then maybe monthly you send a trial balance up to the SAP system or Oracle for consolidation purposes. And that's one way. There's other permutations of how that works and how often that happens, but more or less the business units are running pretty autonomously and then feeding back data from a financial roll-up point of view in the SAP or Oracle system. One thing that's really attractive about this is a lot of companies will start looking at, okay, I do need something different out there, but then they have to go buy another kind of stack of technology, if you will. If your company already has Salesforce, you already know how to add users, you know how to write dashboards, you know how to build out workflows and use chatter and everything else in the system. Rootstock is more of an add-on into that environment than having to pull up a whole new set of systems in order to do it. So it's a much more achievable, easy way to step into another ERP system without having to bring in yet another set of technology in your company. And then the next one is by process. And so a lot of companies are now picking up Salesforce CPQ as an example, or Salesforce Field Service Lightning. And what's happening there is that with those products, there's more need to know what's going on the ERP side of the world. So if you've got Salesforce CPQ, you're going to want to know where's inventory, what's available to promise, you want to be able to see what's happening inside of inventory. Or if you're in field service, it's really important to have the right part at the right place at the right time. And so you're going to need a more robust, a full-blown inventory and supply chain system to manage the parts inventory to make sure field service techs have the stuff they need. You also may have an RMA process that has to go through the whole movement of the goods back and forth to the customer, then through a remanufacturing process, and then maybe back out to the customer. So it's just it's a more extensive view capability than what you can find in Field Service Lightning or CPQ for that matter, with full-blown ERP capabilities. But you're only adding a portion of ERP onto the platform. You're not adding everything. And so then the last one is, and this is kind of a representation of our product line, is to do everything. And some customers will start moving data, some will start moving processes, and then eventually get to this, where you get the kind of all singing, all dancing, all the different modules in play, and you're running ERP from one end to the other, starting on the sales, all the way through service, all on the Salesforce platform. So with that, that's what we wanted to talk about today. Is you can run ERP on the platform in its entirety. We also have steps for you to help you get there in increments by moving the data or moving a process. So Jessica, do you want to open up to questions? What would you like to do?
Yeah, we can do that. We do have a question from Nancy. She's asking how you kind of make the argument for the expense of the Salesforce licenses. I'll just read her question exactly. So it says, one objection she's heard is that license costs for QAD and SAP are less than SFDC licenses. How do we address that beyond the benefits of 360-degree view without integrations?
Well, I mean, if you're buying our product for ERP, you're not buying Salesforce licenses. We have what's called a platform license that goes in there, so you're not necessarily have to buy. you may have for other reasons need more Salesforce licenses. So I think I'd have to know more about the situation to be able to answer it a little bit more accurately. But generally, when you buy our products, the Salesforce platform portion of that is including in it. You may want to buy something like Einstein or something else you're not, and that's different. But you shouldn't have to buy a whole bunch more generally, especially if you have Salesforce today.
Great. Any other questions? And you guys are welcome to put them in the chat box. If you think of something later, we can also take questions at the very end as well.
So Tom, this is Andrew. I'll hop in with a question. So, and I'd say more so in the past 2 years, we've been seeing more and more conversations with manufacturers that have this dilemma where over the past several decades, they've grown organically, but also through acquisition, and through those acquisitions, bring on new ERP systems. And in some cases, we're talking with companies that have like 15 plus different legacy ERPs that are out there, and they're trying to figure out whether they should consolidate and, let's say hypothetically, take those 15 down to 5 core, like your Oracles and SAPs of the world, or invest more in kind of a data management integration type strategy. Are you seeing those same types of concerns in the customers that you guys are talking with? And can you, I guess, when you address that, are you talking to them about that 2-tier strategy, or the kind of transitioning a business unit over as an example, so that roll up can still take place in their larger ERP systems?
Yeah, I think there's a few. We're definitely seeing it, and certainly I think what's happened in like in the CRM world, cloud got adopted a long time ago, right? But manufacturing sort of lagged, but now manufacturers on the ERP side are getting the religion and understanding the value and the benefit, so they want to move. And how they do it all depends on their situations. As I was saying, we have one customer who, in particular, that's got about 5 different ERP systems, different geographies and things. And their kind of general, approach is going to be, they have started with some processes, did those, then they're actually going to the data framework idea to move all the data in on the platform, to use Einstein to give them better reporting visibility. And then they're going to start picking off each of those other units to eventually move it all on the platform. So they're actually doing it in a little different order. I think it depends a lot on how different each of your business units are, or how the same they are. And so that's why when you look at, they put a corporate system and can that be used in lots of other ones, or are they all very different and do need to be independent and need very specific things? So it's a little hard to answer your question exactly what would happen, but what we'd like to do is say, look, we got options for you. And with the cloud and Salesforce, there's different ways you can go about doing this. So it's definitely happening. The market is definitely, woken up to it. There's also a number of legacy systems that are going out of service, and their end of life is coming, and it's been announced. And so there's not only a carrot, there's a stick to move as well.
Yep, that makes sense. Well, Tom, we really appreciate you sharing this information and taking the time today. And this recording, like I said, will be posted out for the rest of the folks to consume. And as more questions, if they trickle in, we'll share your contact information out, and hope to keep some of this dialogue going.
Yeah, and I'm happy to. By the way, I'll follow up on the questions. And please reach out. It's Brennan, BRENNAN at rootstock.com.
We'll also share out the emails and contact and social media details as well. Yep. All right, Jess, do you want to intro Lewis?
Sure. Lewis Columbus is a principal at IQMS, and he's a regular contributor to Forbes. His background includes leadership roles in marketing, product management, sales, and industry analysis at various enterprise software and IT companies. And he also teaches MBA courses in a variety of topics and regularly publishes insightful reports and columns on the state of the manufacturing industry. And so we're really excited to have him with us today to kind of share some of his latest research on where manufacturers are investing for growth in 2019. So, Louis, I'll let you take it from here.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for everybody listening virtually now and in the future. Good Friday to everybody. At IQMS, which is now part of Dassault Systems, I focus a lot on strategy, running quarterly overall research projects. Really interested in what's going on with our customer base. We were just acquired at the beginning of the year by Dassault, and they are a very data-centric organization, which is good news for us because at IQMS we're big into data. And in our latest survey we just did, we surveyed 150 North American manufacturers, the majority of our customers. And, 2018 was an amazing year in manufacturing. You ask our customers, and I spent a lot of time traveling and visiting with a lot of our customers, writing up their stories, building up data sets, and also looking at what the implications are on our product strategies and our roadmaps, which has gotten a real shot in the arm, quite frankly, from the Dassault System. So we're going to be doing a lot more integration with 3D modeling. Of course, with SolidWorks, we're partnering with them really tight. And coincident with that, you walk the top floors of North American manufacturing and even European manufacturing, and what you find is that in that 2018 growth of 10 to 25%, some of them grew, they're now plowing dollars back into manufacturing operations. And even from, the smallest metal fabrication plant in northern Wisconsin, tucked away in, beautiful forests up there, all the way into large-scale manufacturing, right in the heart of Detroit, or, pick the manufacturing center of the world. And all these companies have a common theme that's coming out, and it came in our surveys and it's shown on the screen, is that they're looking at machinery upgrades as the ability to increase shop floor productivity. Over 70% of them said improving shop floor productivity is my top growth strategy for 2019. 1.4 times more than spending on marketing, which really surprised us, because what that said is that this era of smart connected machinery is here. And nothing makes it more real than when you walk into a brand manufacturing facility that's a spin-off. That 2018, again, was a great year for this world-class manufacturer in Denver. They built a brand new plant. It's $1.7 million of smart connected machines that can run multiple cycles and multiple overall plant sessions automated. And so we're seeing that there's a couple of factors that are driving these existing machinery upgrades, new machinery with smart connected machinery. It's in the machinery market itself that there's a great deal of price consolidation. Asian and Pacific Rim manufacturers can replicate the machinery itself at a lot cheaper cost than North American or even European manufacturers can. And so what they're doing with these manufacturers, these machinery manufacturers are doing, is they're reverting back into, how do I make my machine smarter? How do I embed greater artificial intelligence capability? How do I make my machines play well with AI and machine learning? And Tom brought that up about Einstein, and Einstein has made substantial gains in financial services and in the services world and in manufacturing. And we're seeing a lot of interest in that area. Coincident with real-time monitoring. What real-time monitoring is the ability to basically pull data out of the manufacturing process and be able to aggregate it and look for trends in it. And of course, that data is very rich with context, and it's perfect for running big data-oriented queries, advanced analytics queries, and also being able to do artificial intelligence and rule-based definition. So these are all the things that are going on in manufacturers' minds right now. But they're plowing a lot of money back into machinery, which is a really, really good thing, because what that means is that it sets the stage for going into competing on intelligence and knowledge rather than just chasing cost and availability. We're even seeing manufacturers turn down deals, turn down build offers on price alone. And they're like, and they're of the mindset of, we don't play the commodity game anymore. We want customers. We want a high quality customer that wants our knowledge and expertise. In addition, robotics is the fourth highest investment category. And robotics is best exemplified in the story of a small manufacturer tucked away in, again, the rural areas of Oregon, beautiful forest again, and it's in the middle of nowhere, but this company is pumping out 1 million parts a week for a medical products manufacturer in Germany who couldn't find anybody else to handle it at their price point. And the manufacturer tucked away in the hills of Oregon can't find enough people to build these parts. And so they invested in a couple of robotic stackers. Now they could do 1 million parts a week. They have a deal, an ongoing contract with one of the biggest medical products companies in Germany right now. And so what's really encouraging about this is that the ability of manufacturers to compete on a global scale and sell their intelligence and their insight, it matters more now to so many medical products companies that want to outsource production, plastics manufacturing companies, medical device manufacturers that want to outsource. It's all about chasing intelligence now, and that's really encouraging from a quality perspective as well. And then system integration, and Tom mentioned about that as well, and we see that quite a bit going on. SAP legacy systems, people aren't exactly ripping and replacing those, but they are integrating the Salesforce. Salesforce is the front-end system of record, system of choice for so many of our manufacturing customers because it serves up dashboards that give them greater insight. So when you look at the most popular technologies that come out of our survey, real-time monitoring and MES, that's manufacturing execution system, leads the way. Quality management, always a perennial winner in terms of any survey we do. We do them once a quarter, and quality, last year, 92% of manufacturers, when asked, what defines your success? What does success mean to you? And they said, 92% said that my customers see me as a high quality supplier. And they do surveys of that. So that's how important quality is. Maintenance, repair, and overhaul. Again, machines are getting smarter. The ability to run interfaces. Some of them can self-correct themselves. Now, this doesn't mean that the workforce is necessarily impacted by that. What it means is that the jobs that are available are much, much more interesting to do, quite frankly, because you're looking at data and you're being able to solve some of the more complex optimization aspects on the shop floor. And to Tom's point, that often said term about CRM, a 360-degree view of the customer, we're seeing a 360-degree view of the shop floor as being really important. And even the smallest manufacturers are willing to spend to get that because they don't want anything to leave the building that isn't perfect. And ERP systems, people are replacing them, people are adding them on. We see two-tier as well. Again, there's a lot of conflicting voices in the market about rip and replace on SAP and Oracle. No one who has invested millions of dollars in that, and there's CIOs who have bet their entire careers on that. There's nowhere that those systems are going. I mean, the data in those system stuff has a shelf life. They have a half-life of about 7 to 8 years on some of the data in there, but they're still mining it, and they're doing two-tier to be able to capitalize on that. And you can see quality management's pretty important in A&D, as you would suspect. In plastics manufacturing, we're seeing a lot of audits. I talked to a manufacturer just yesterday, and they just recently acquired real-time monitoring. So when I saw their customer record get updated in our CRM system, I called them and found out that they're running 5 audits a month for customers to make sure that the product quality is good. It's not that their customers don't trust them. It's just that their customers are building. They were the inventors of that pressure-sensitive top, the child's safety lock on medicines. And so their business, of course, is like booming. They have 8 manufacturing plants in the U.S. and they're buying more. And they said that that's just part of the requirement of selling an FDA-sanctioned product, that they have to have audits from these customers. And so they adopted a brand new ERP system in conjunction with real-time monitoring to be able to meet that need. And fabricated metal, which is kind of the heartbeat of the Rust Belt and the northern industrial manufacturing area of Michigan, Wisconsin, throughout that whole area, we're seeing quality become even more important because the car manufacturers have increased their overall requirement for that. There's a MOOC standard that's out there. There's evolving standards there, and it's highly competitive in metal manufacturing right now to hit quality standards to sell to someone like GM, Ford, Chrysler, Toyota. And the real-time monitoring benefits, as you can see, are the efficiency of order to cycle times, accuracy improvement, quality control. But I think a key takeaway of real-time monitoring, and this data substantiated a lot of the visits that we had, about 50% of companies are adopting it. But the companies that do adopt it, they go all in. I mean, they basically re-engineer themselves based on that real-time data. And what does that real-time data mean to a Salesforce customer? Well, so many manufacturers, they do not have a large IT department, and they really want somebody they can trust with their customer relationship. So they go to Salesforce, and then they build dashboards on the Salesforce platform. Some of them do have developers, and so they'll use Force.com APIs, and some of them, the more sophisticated ones with multiple plants, and the ones over 100 million a year, will do that. Smaller ones will use the native apps to build dashboards, and what they're looking at is the efficiency of order cycle times. They're looking at productivity of the shop floor. If you look at the productivity of the shop floor as a flywheel, and it was spinning pretty good in 2018, manufacturers today, overwhelmingly, 70% of them said, I want that to spin faster, but I also want accuracy to be improved and greater quality control. And so therefore, I'm going to double down on real-time monitoring. They're also doing things like overall equipment effectiveness and track and trace. In medical products, and the more regulated the products, the more important track and trace becomes. And track and trace, we're seeing a serious uplift in demand for track and trace right now, mainly because of supply chain and the supply chain proliferation and diaspora of suppliers across some of these different industries. And track and trace becomes much more important, even to a plastics manufacturer, which is really surprising because they're dealing with a process good. But they want to be able to track it back again for the FDA requirements and for everything down to how they build child safety locks on medical products. And then overall equipment effectiveness, we're seeing that manufacturers could turn around. There's one manufacturer that I visited that had a 30% reject rate of quality. They started running periodic audits. They were starting to implement real-time monitoring on a couple of select machines, and then they were able to take that 30% reject rate down to 2% because they were finding variations in machine performance using real-time monitoring to figure all this out. Now, this is getting down right onto the shop floor and getting kind of like the heartbeat of the machine. This is basically like an EKG of a machine. And knowing how healthy it is, what's going on, it's really critical to continue to keep overall production efficiency going, and these stats reflect that. But it's the speed and the customer expectations that are driving this overall. And so what we're also seeing is we're starting to see adoption of IoT for real-time monitoring. It's nascent, it's relatively new, but we're seeing companies move in this direction more and more with sensor and actuator analytic systems. And, the secret of all this is that the manufacturers who look at this progression as a data-centric direction. In other words, they build their data models, they build their taxonomies, they build everything around, can those sensors scale for the kind of data I want? Am I going to be satisfied with binary data off of that sensor, or do I want interval level, ratio level data? Can I deal with that kind of data? And can I be able to make use of it with enterprise analytic systems? So what we're seeing is that the visualization gets best with embedded analytics around platform and streaming analytic systems that rely on a controller, a service message bus. This evolution of being able to listen directly to machines, be able to troubleshoot them, and only provide alerts to quality engineers and those people on the shop floor when a machine is looking like it might break down, or it's approaching an MRO level or a preventative maintenance level, almost like a car. A late model cars will tell you, it's almost time for an oil change. These machines now, and what we're seeing more and more, is these machines will actually provide a note of, I've been running a couple of shifts in lights out manufacturing or unattended manufacturing, therefore I need this type of maintenance, or I need this type of update. And these are all connected on a secured LAN. security is absolutely critical in the world of IoT for real-time monitoring as well. And what we're seeing is that companies are moving more towards a zero trust model where every threat surface is protected. One CIO told me, and I thought it was just so insightful, he said, every one of our devices, we have to look at every identity as a new security perimeter of our plant because we're growing so quickly, but also we know that our competitors would like nothing more than to know what's going on in here. This is a plant tucked away in the fields of Fort Collins, Colorado, with an amazing view of the Rocky Mountains, but there's nothing around it but horses. But they realize that, in a digital age, it doesn't matter where you are, competitors will find you, and that you have to protect that data. But that aspect of manufacturing can happen anywhere, and it can be globally strong anywhere because of these kinds of technologies. And it doesn't have to be, aggregated into, a place like Detroit or, a place like Pittsburgh or, any of these other, intensive manufacturing places from the last century. Manufacturing, the fastest growing manufacturers chase brains. They don't chase cost, they chase brains. They chase intelligence around the planet. And so they build centers of excellence. They start to grow that more and more. Tesla, however you feel about, the product strategy, and SpaceX, Elon Musk is very, very good at finding brains and hiring them and scaling them. One thing he does really well is overall equipment effectiveness of the machines building SpaceX rockets. And these leading manufacturers, this is they're chasing things around the world because they want to take real-time monitoring and they want to understand real-time overall equipment effectiveness. And to equate this into human terms, this is a snapshot of an EKG of a machine. So if you went into a doctor and they did an EKG of you and doctor comes back and says, yeah, that's great. You can keep run as much as you want, whatever, work out as much as you want. This is an EKG of a machine. And so what quality engineers do is they look at how is the machine cost, improve productivity, improve quality. So they're really looking at how to build out these benefits, and this is an overall yield graphic of what that looks like. Now, this is all represented on dashboards as different dials and different approaches, but OEE in terms of availability, performance, and quality are the foundations, and the UDT and PDT are unplanned and planned downtime. And what happens is a yield curve starts to happen, and the value of AI machine learning and manufacturing. Now, the value of real-time monitoring and analytics is that you can save yourself hundreds of thousands, and if you're a big manufacturer, millions of dollars of having your machine shut down if you can understand what the red zone looks like with each machine. And so that's what real-time monitoring and the future of manufacturing is doing. When you talk about manufacturers investing for shop floor productivity and plowing money back into the business, this is what they're interested in. Is they don't want unwelcome surprises. They want to continue to grow as fast as they can. They want to continue to hit quality targets, and they don't want to scrap a machine if there's any life left in it whatsoever. But with that comparable allegory, every machine is going to perform in a different way. And so from a customer's perspective, it's so important to know this, because here's the basically the card that this is kind of like, this is a dashboard that came out of our system. Einstein can generate these just as well. Force APIs can, a good Force developer could have this with the data set up in a day or a half day. They could build a dashboard. A good R developer running with Force data could have this done in like half a day. So what this tells you is the components of OEE, but this also is that EKG rating of these machines. And why this all matters is our best manufacturing customers and the companies that are growing the fastest and are getting the greatest efficiency out of the dollars they're reinvesting, and the future of manufacturing overall is really about strong analytics and something called the DMAC methodology. It's a part of the Six Sigma overall hierarchy. Some people call it DMAC, I call it DMAC, but it's a component of Six Sigma that isolates those areas in manufacturing that most valued by a customer and tells you how you're doing against customer expectations. And so that's what our customers are focused on. Our best customers are focused on that. The ones that are growing, buying plants, had 25% growth. And, you know, they're all great into 3D modeling. This is one of the many reasons that Dassault bought us, is that we had a 60% overlap with SolidWorks in our customer base. And how all this plays out is you go visit, and after I did the survey and I found the company's growing over 25% a year, I just said to myself, I got to visit these companies. I got to go see what's going on, because it's just so fascinating to look at the data. And you walk in the plant, and first of all, the plant's cathedrals to data. I mean, they're just amazing cultures. So there are, you know, of course, flat screens that show availability of machine by process. You talk to shop floor operators and the people running the machines. They know exactly what they're trying to accomplish. They even know the customer they're building the order for. And some of them who've been there for decades know how long that customer has been a customer. So there's this ownership and this positive kind of drive that companies build using data. And where CAD comes into this is that you go visit these fast-growing companies, and they are really aggressive about orchestrating a variety of different dissimilar technologies around the customer. So they don't care if IQMS built, you know, this component, or that 3D modeler was built by SolidWorks, who was, you know, not part of IQMS, you know, last year, and or that, you know, that IoT sensor is built by, you know, Bosch. They don't care. All they want to do is they want to bring all these technologies together to one concerted, customer-focused strategy. And the top 25% talk about technology. They don't talk about cloud. They don't talk about ERP. They don't talk about any of the technologies that, you know, the media talk so much about. But what they talk about is, we're doing this because our customers were taking this direction of speed, or we had to buy that robotics device because we couldn't find someone in the room that's competitive enough where we could hold our own against any manufacturer anywhere building plastics. And now we're growing, and now we can afford more time to go find more people. So the labor issue is not being understated right now when you walk the shop floors of North American manufacturing, specifically, even globally. But what SolidWorks is doing, and what CAD software does, is it allows companies to go from vision to reality. It allows them to partner closer with their customers when they design products. They can go right into the mold process or right into the production of prototypes. And it also drives greater quality. So on technology adoption, this is a drill down on that slide you saw earlier. It's a little bit of a replication of that data, but you can see CRM comes in sixth. We're seeing that the more money manufacturers have, again, because 2018 was such a blowout year for them, that they're more willing to replace their CRM systems now. So we're starting to see a pickup that way. But they're staying true to, you know, that axiom. 90% of them themselves being judged by customers on quality, and a lot of them do audits. It's astounding how many of the top manufacturers audit themselves constantly and use that as a learning ecosystem. They build learning ecosystems. In conjunction with that, they're extremely aggressive about the way they use technologies around the customer. And you see robotics. Robotics is really an outgrowth of not being able to find enough people. And analytics and business intelligence, product configuration, which Tom briefly talked about CPQ. We see CPQ in our segment. We see solid modeling and 3D modeling being the de facto standard that SolidWorks is now catalyst of growth. Is huge. Inconsistent supplier quality, which is another reason that companies are buying supplier and quality management systems. Sales cycles are taking longer than expected because products are getting more complex. And then not enough qualified sales leads coming in from marketing. That's down. You know, that's less than half of skilled labor. And so this year, what you're going to see more and more is you're going to see companies make the capital investment in making machines smarter so that they can unattended in consecutive production shifts. We also see this overall explosion in manufacturers themselves will go our connected products aggressively than ever before. selling into, that are suppliers themselves, and the majority within the survey are suppliers into other companies, and they have some consumer products or B2C products. What you're going to see there is much more embedding intelligence and analytics in a direction more towards how do I create a learning ecosystem around my product and create services around it to escape price wars. And finally, the skill shortage, they're relying on posting ads. The manufacturers who are the most successful in overcoming skill shortage, they bring in interns and they train them, and they work with placement services, and they will even sponsor courses at tech colleges. A manufacturer in Pennsylvania actually donated a chair, the first chair this college has ever had. In other words, they invested over $1 million in this college to get a chair. So they have their chair in the engineering school. And the reason they did that is because they want on 3D modeling and production techniques tested in a remote area. And they want more graduates in their area. So they said, fine, we'll just go ahead and we'll buy you a school. We'll basically help you build a school around manufacturing technology. So that's how quite people. And so, this gets also back to manufacturing majors coming out of colleges are incredibly high demand, especially when they have analytics and programming training, but also trade skills, and some of these different trades have qualified what means they're doing 1 or 2 shifts, working a lot of hours, and so manufacturers are concerned about how do they balance that out. And so that's the extent of the research results. But I think the bottom line is these fast-growing manufacturers that I visited have this strong culture around data. They orchestrate technologies around customers better than anybody else. They don't get hung up on specific, manufacturing technologies, or they're even more pragmatic and, dare I say, less trusting of new technologies unless they're proven, and then they go after them full bore. But they're really interested in how do you mine the data and create dashboards where you know what's going on 24/7, anytime, be able to understand what's going on with multiple production shifts. So, think of those manufacturers tucked away in those forests of Wisconsin and Oregon that are competing, with the best manufacturers in Munich or Heidelberg, or, even, in the northern parts of Europe, where manufacturing is such a strong skill set globally. But they're able to hold their own mainly because they're able to go ahead and use knowledge and intelligence to their advantage of the production process and be intellectually strong in those remote locations and continue to excel at what they do. So with that, that's the majority of, those are all my slides. So if you have any other questions, we can open it up for questions now.
Hey, Lewis, this is Andrew. First off, thank you very much for that presentation. Definitely a lot of great insights and data to digest. So definitely probably be listening to this a couple more times to extract out all that information. But the thing that really hits me as it relates back to the Salesforce for Manufacturing User Group Committee that I'm glad you were able to kind of articulate is the 2 key pieces that stood out were not only just about data, but that 360-degree view of the shop floor and the 360-degree view of the customer. And I think a lot of the admins or developers or folks that have sort of the business analyst role and a lot of the manufacturers that we're seeing, but also that are part of this user group, I think they understand the customer CRM side of the house, but have an understanding gap, if you will, as it relates to the shop floor and manufacturing side. And so our goal for this group is to share more and more insights around this and have folks like you articulate that, so that I think a lot of these, a lot of the representation that we have in this user group will definitely benefit from it, because I think that they are chomping at the bit to expose more data and Salesforce and to leverage things like Einstein and to provide those dashboards that you're talking about. But in order to do that, they need to know who within the organization to go talk to, and an understanding of the problems or barriers, if you will, that they're facing. So the goal for us is to keep sharing more information like this and keep educating this group so that they can be more empowered to take more ownership of some of these projects internally.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're welcome. And going back to a conversation I had with a VP of marketing at a plastics manufacturer just yesterday, and asked him what metrics he's got going, and he's running Salesforce, and he built a dashboard on that, and he said, if we don't have a metric, he said we have over 50 metrics to evaluate, because they're in 5 different core businesses, all in plastic. Some of them are more highly regulated than others. They're the inventor of that stuff. So you know what? We just go ahead and create a new metric, and that's the beauty of being on a Force platform with APIs and that agility. They can get somebody right out of school who knows R and Force and can program, and they'll have a dashboard or new metrics up immediately. And they do have real-time monitoring in place, which helps them tremendously to run, multiple shifts. And it is changing the nature of manufacturing work and the nature of the manufacturing workforce, which is it's giving manufacturing workers on the shop floor a impetus to be politically oriented and to go out and get certifications and to pursue travel medicine and understand, in those IT departments of manufacturers, to get through an entire Salesforce curriculum and be more valuable to the company. And I have heard of some administrators being intimidated by Einstein. I've actually talked with some of them and said, instead of worrying about Einstein taking your job in IT of this manufacturing plant, why don't you become certified on Einstein, and why don't you just be the driver of it? Rather than being afraid of the change, become the driver of the change. In other words, be the catalyst that drives that into the organization, be recognized as the expert. And so this person immediately jumped into the Salesforce Trailhead curriculum and got certified in a week. But it wasn't long. It was 2 weeks. And so I was talking to him, and
right.
It's so they're going to get an Einstein license, but it's the opportunity to get in front of the change, than be affected by it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're spot on. I think there's a lot of fear with whether it's new technologies or robotics or AI and all the buzzwords that you hear, but I think you're spot on is to get out in front of it and be an enabler and subject matter expert of it, rather than fearing that it's going to take or replace your position.
Exactly. And none of the manufacturers I've ever talked to have said we're buying robotics to replace full-time equivalent people.
Right. The
only time I've heard is, like I said, these remote areas where there's not people, and even in some of the more metropolitan areas, they're just saying, we have this order and we have to fulfill this order with this large German company, the large European company, large American company. I just can't find the people. I could ask my people to work overtime, but I don't want to burn my people out and ask them to work 7 days a week. And, I want them to have a balanced life. So as the labor shortage eases, robotics, I think, would start to see somewhat of a lapse. But really, they're focused on how do I take that machine I have on the floor and get more value out of it? How to replace it if it's aging? Or best, how do I get a smart machine that does SPC and does other things that can hire people who have this analytics mindset and this process mindset to keep the machinery running extremely well. And it's not as draconian as a lot of people make it out to be. It is not an either-or situation. These manufacturers dearly want to grow and dearly want to hire people. It's just a matter of, can they find them? And it's a big deal. But Einstein, getting ahead of the Einstein aspect of this in manufacturing is an amazingly bright future for anyone.
Yeah, I agree. So Jess, I don't know, I haven't seen any other questions come through from anybody that's participating live, but If there are, feel free to speak up now. Otherwise, Tom, Lewis, we greatly appreciate you guys taking the time on a Friday afternoon to chat with us. And these sessions were recorded, so we'll break them up into the individual respective presentations and post these back out to the user group community for folks to digest. But really appreciate it, and thank you all for spending the time with us today.
Yeah, well, thank you.
All right. Well, with that being said, we'll also share out your contact info when we post these presentations. But thanks to everybody that participated live, and for anybody that listens after the fact. And this will end our second virtual user group. Looking forward to more of these.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.